I'm chatting today to Kevin Pashby, who's actually the producer of a breakfast radio show for WM, and he's also been the head of news for BRB Radio and worked in radio for 16 years. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem.
We just wanted to pick your brains, really, because we've been talking from a PR point of view on how to approach the media and really to understand that you guys actually need us as much as we need you, that it is a two-way relationship. And what is great is to pick your brains, really, because you've worked in commercial radio and also now you're working for the BBC. Just going back a little bit to the commercial radio, obviously you were head of news. Did you get a load of press releases coming in? How did it all work?
Absolutely. It's the same either way, commercial or the BBC. You get so many press releases, you don't know what to do with them at the end of the day. You get people emailing you, phone calls, and you're always looking out for pieces of news and information as well. So, yeah, there's a heavy turnaround of press releases that come into you at the news desk or into your own personal email accounts.
So do you actually go through them, Kevin? Are people wasting their time, or do you actually look at them all? Because I'm sure you don't get time to respond to them all, but do you look at them?
Absolutely, because we recognise that, as you're saying, it is a two-way street. We need you as much as you need us, even more so at the BBC. In the world of commercial radio, they have very limited time of what they cover and how much news and information they actually put out. But at the BBC, when you've got high levels of speech-based radio, you need content to fill that time. But what you need is good content. And how you make sure what's the difference between good content and bad content could actually come across in the way that you put that press release together or in the way that you're selling the actual story.
So what would make you see something with good content, or what would make you look at a press release? Is it the way that it's written? Is it the subject box? What would you say?
It would be the ease in which it was written for me, because we get so many press releases coming in. I mean, if I was to estimate, back at BRMB, we'd have something at the end of the day, maybe 200 plus press releases per day. Here at the BBC, it's probably more, and the information that we get in from other sources as well mixed in with that means that we're literally seeing hundreds of story ideas on a day-to-day basis. So what I'd say to somebody who was thinking about putting a press release together and putting it out is, before you even start writing the press release, is getting a blank piece of paper and thinking, right, what are the main points that we want to get across here to these producers, presenters, journalists? What are the main crux of the stories? And come up with 3 lines of what is the actual story. And then you need to make sure that that is put across in the first paragraph, because generally speaking, that's all that someone like me or a journalist may read is the first paragraph. And if you've not got us hooked in, if you've not solved that story within that first paragraph, and then we're going to move on to the next one. It's no point putting the best bits of the press release, the best bits of the story or the event at the bottom or at the back or on the second page. We need to see it. It needs to be delivered to us in a way. Just like you get a meal in a restaurant, it needs to be presented to us in an easy, understandable form so that we can see very clearly and very quickly what it is you're trying to do. Is it a good news story? Is it just a PR story where you're trying to sell something but you're putting that news line on it? And we'll very quickly identify those and get rid of them. So you really have to make them stand out very clearly. No gimmicks, no photographs. You don't have to worry about the font size, what font it's written in. It's just the information that we're after.
And in terms then of the person that you interview, because I think a lot of people don't understand this as well, because obviously a lot of the women in business are mums that we're dealing with and that we're trying to help, and they're busy people, they've got the children, and I think the perception is you have to always go into the studio, and that's not the case at all. I think I've only been into the studio twice. More often than not, you can do your radio interview purely over the telephone line these days, can't you?
Absolutely, and there's all kinds of different ways that we can do that now as well. You don't always have to get to the studio to where the radio show is. If your story's really that big and that massive and a great event, we may send the radio car out to you and a reporter to do the interview there. Or we can always do it over the phone, and it doesn't have to be, it has to be a good quality landline though, or a very, very good quality mobile phone. It's just really the quality. We can't do hands-free, so if you're in the car, then we couldn't do that because of the way that sounds and come across. We'll just lose people on the radio. The way that I always explain it is, when you're doing an interview, regardless of how it's recorded, you have to remember that the people who are listening to the radio you're already fighting a battle for them to keep listening to you, because listening to the radio in your car, at home, you have everyday distractions. So we have to deliver that interview in the most clearest form so it stands out and people don't lose it. So, yeah, there's loads of different ways about doing it. And the big thing that you must realise when you're doing a radio interview is that no one's going to eat you, gobble you up and spit you out. We're not all Jeremy.
I know, unless people are so scared of this.
Absolutely. But you know what? It's just like me and you having this conversation now. That would be going out on the radio. And it's just like you talking to your mate. And it's best to probably think of it like that you're down the pub talking to your mate. You're not talking to a radio presenter. You're not talking to someone formal. They're not going to grill you. They're not going to be horrible to you. They're just going to be nice. They want to hear about your news and hear about your story. And
I think this is what... Sorry, Kev, I think this is what they need to understand as well, is you're speaking to them because they're knowledgeable in their field. So they haven't got to worry about any trick questions. They just need to talk from the heart, don't they? You know, and I think this is really important, is don't try and make out to be someone that you're not. Don't talk about a subject that you don't know about, because that won't be conducive to you guys. You won't like that. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to be on that interview because you are the expert, or you're knowledgeable about that field, or they just want you for... really your just natural reaction, either sometimes the mum, because I've done interviews with you before and it's all helped out on the shows, and it's just been because I'm a mum from that point of view. So you just have to talk naturally, don't you?
You do, absolutely. And never try that trick. I've caught so many people out who've pretended they know more than what they actually do. You just then set yourself up for failure, and we find it quite humorous and quite funny. So, yeah, you don't have to worry about being the world's greatest expert on the chosen field, as long as you've got enough knowledge to know what it is that the messages that you want to get across. And I'd go back to even when you're doing that interview, get that sheet of paper out that you started off with your 3 main points and have that in front of you. And if you do get stuck, you just go back to those points, because they're the selling points. They're the points that you want to get across. And a bit like a politician always skirts around the issue and moves it on to whatever they want to get across to. You've got something to sell. You've got something to get across, so you have to use any way that you can to make that happen. So, yeah, you haven't got to be worried about anything. And you can always say to the journalist or the presenter or the producer of the show, just give me a rough idea of the type of questions that you're going to ask. We probably won't give you a list of questions that we're going to give you, because interviews need to sound spontaneous and natural. But we can give you a rough guideline of the areas that we will talk to you about, so you'll know before you even gone on the radio what the constraints are.
And what about in terms of, because obviously a lot of people are doing this so they can either try and obviously build themselves an expert or get a little mention of their business. Are there do's and don'ts to what they should do and what they shouldn't do? For example, they shouldn't really ask for recordings of the interview. It's down to them, really, isn't it, to record it themselves, because you're busy people, or is it acceptable that they can ask for a recording of the interview?
We tend not to give out recordings of the interviews because we do so many interviews, then we could spend all day doing that, and we don't have the resources these days to have a specific person who can do that. So it's really up to the interviewee to sort them out themselves. There's all kinds of companies that offer the monitoring services and will do it for you. Or the easy way, I'd say, is just to press the play and record on your cassette, CD, mini disc, whatever it is that you're using, MP3 player.
Yeah, or even on your computer, you can go into another room and record what you've got on your computer at the time, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And those interviews will be available, obviously, the BBC on the Listen Again, the iPlayer, and that kind of thing. So there are options to hopefully download it afterwards or record it in some way.
And is there anything else they shouldn't do, or is there anything you should really encourage?
I wouldn't make a pest of yourself. If you've been told no on a story and you've been told politely that, sorry, no, we're not going to be able to cover that, then I wouldn't keep going back and trying different ways to get that story, because we'll just get annoyed and then you'll have a black mark against your name for the future and we remember you. Just really just be polite and just just give us a phone call. We're not demons. We're not horrible. If you just want to talk through a story idea, then phone the news desk. There's always someone available to have a chat with you over the phone. And if they haven't got the time, they may invite you to send an email or something. But just try and know who it is that you're going to talk to as well. If you want to talk to the news editor or the producer, then you should really go to the trouble of finding out what their name is before you make the phone call, because then that shows us you've made a little bit of effort rather than just saying, can I speak to the breakfast producer? Because that just shows to us that, okay, you've not done your research, and it just makes it a bit more informal, I guess.
No, that's really, really helpful. And in terms of then, overall, I think it's don't be scared. Pick up the phone, give it a go, give their research, but just be natural. I think that's the biggest thing, really, isn't it? And also be as helpful as they can. Because what you just said is true. If they don't do things right, or if they constantly mention their company name, they'll get a little blacklist, and you won't go back and use them again. If they go out of their way to help you on all sorts of topics, you constantly do call people back, don't you? You build up your bank of people that you know you can rely and trust on.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget that once you're in that bank at the BBC, it's not just that radio station who can access that number and the notes about you. It'd be anyone who works for the BBC. So I also wouldn't be surprised that once you've done an interview with the likes of the BBC, and if we like you and you become a regular contributor, then you'd make it into the BBC's phone book, and then anyone from Jeremy Vine to, I don't know, anyone, the big players, the big news channels can access those contacts, and they might get in touch with you as well.
Oh, well, that's an interesting point, because I don't think many people actually do know that you do actually have a central database in it. So it's not just your little personal diary of your own contacts. It actually does go into a central database.
Yeah, it can go into a central database, absolutely. And that's absolutely just used for BBC purposes. It's not sold on or used for any other purpose whatsoever. It's just basically, but you would normally be asked permission for us to put your details into that database.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it, and thank you for all those insider secrets and tips. And for anyone that's been listening to this, like Kev said, just go for it. Don't worry about it. Just be completely natural. Take a bit of time to do your research and find out who you're speaking to, and be as helpful as you can. Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
And we'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Rachel.